Bad news, good news, and great news. That's what you can expect in today's episode of IWPK. Intentionality with Paul Kempf, for people who lead with intention and live with impact. First, the bad news. I think I might have found a small problem with the very foundation of this podcast. I've been forced to confront a flaw in my thinking from 2 years ago when I decided to dedicate an entire show and now more than 70 episodes to the idea of engineering a more intentional life. It is a realization that has been creeping up on me over the last few weeks, and confronting it, questioning the core premise of everything I have done on IWPK so far is certainly not easy. Added to this, my next birthday is around the corner. 2 days after recording this episode, I will turn 53. No substantial landmark age, but certainly time again for some reflection and contemplation. And another stark reminder about time. More specifically, raising questions in my mind about how much time I might have left and how I will spend that time. A topic for a very interesting episode I am planning and working on for some time in the not too distant future. Second, the good news. I can struggle with this problem I have. I can work through the questions and realizations and spend the time and energy and contemplation necessary to solve the problem. And then, when I find the answers, I can simply share the shortcuts with you. If you then ever find yourself struggling with a similar problem in the future, you can save yourself a lot of time, effort, potential disappointment, and even trauma by simply listening to this podcast. And then finally, the great news. I believe I have found the solutions to this specific problem. At the very least, I have found some fascinating practical ideas to share with you today that have the potential to help you in your life in one way or another. Today, I will give you a list of solutions that I believe might just be my best, most practical list yet. If you agree and find value in this episode, please share this podcast and YouTube video with someone you believe can benefit from hearing it. Your engagement and support on whatever platform you use helps us build this intentional community. But let me not get ahead of myself. I'm already excited by my list of solutions, and I haven't even told you yet what the problem is. So, are you ready for it? Here is my dramatic realization or revelation today. It is not that easy to live a more intentional life. I think I know what you're thinking right now. Not so dramatic, Paul, not so groundbreaking. Or, I already knew this, Paul, and I did not even need to have my own podcast to realize this. Wait, please allow me to explain why I believe this discussion is still a valuable one to have before you move on to the next podcast or YouTube video. Now, I'm not saying life is hard. We discussed this topic in great detail in episode 69, and I'm still convinced life is much easier than we think and that we often make it harder than what it needs to be. No, I am saying that becoming and staying intentional in everything you do, something I've been advocating for, preaching about, and personally striving towards for more than 2 years, is proving much more difficult to maintain than I initially anticipated. To be more specific, living a disciplined life, increasing the amount of discipline you have in your life, and applying discipline and intentionality consistently to every single aspect of your existence is more challenging than I ever imagined. I feel like I'm becoming a bit of a mind reader on IWPK because I'm increasingly able to know what people are thinking. I can see it in the eyes of my production team. Duh, Paul. Of course that's the case. You are simply stating the absurdly obvious. But it is important to remember that this intentionality journey started with me over the last 5 years or so, shifting from more and more into new intentional behaviors and thoughts. And the initial success I had with these more intentional behaviors and thoughts led me to believe that a full spectrum, 100% intentional life was simply a matter of continuous effort. And then, crucially, that if I was able to do it consistently and unwaveringly, without exception, I could serve as an example that would inspire more people to live a more intentional life. And this is where, in hindsight, obvious flaw started to appear. Now, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to call this flaw in my thinking intentional fatigue. Now, to me, being intentional means control over your thoughts, mindset, words, actions, and habits. In short, everything you do. It means being disciplined, doing the right thing, doing the healthy thing, making sacrifices in all your choices and decisions in your life at all times. No room for mediocrity or failure. Intentional fatigue started creeping into my life recently. I found myself struggling to keep the positive progress and positive momentum going in every single aspect of my life. Simultaneously, the impact I was having in getting people in my community, my colleagues, my friends, my family, the audience of IWPK to change their behavior was not yielding the consistent exponential results I had hoped for. And that made me realize, if I, the spokesperson for intentionality, the expert on living a more intentional life, can experience intentional fatigue, then it is something that a lot more people will struggle with. And I had to talk about it on the show. Okay, so what does failing to live a consistently intentional life look like? How does intentional fatigue show up? It starts subtly. A skipped morning run, eating something unhealthy, saying something mean to someone that did not deserve it, wasting time on something completely unproductive, thinking negative thoughts, feeling less motivated than before. By my own high standards, these were all signs that I was failing to live an intentional life. And I admit it, this has been me for quite a while now, something I have experienced and become acutely aware of with increasing frequency in my life. What about all of you? Are you happy with your discipline levels? Do you feel that you are able to maintain a high level of intentionality at all times in your life? Or do you also sometimes slip up and just want a day off from the hamster wheel? Do you find yourself sometimes questioning the wisdom of it all, or struggle to find the motivation to keep going? When have you done enough? When can you truly give yourself a break? Do you sometimes feel like you have burnout? I think burnout and intentional fatigue are similar. They can have the same warning signs and potentially even similar consequences. Burnout and/or intentional fatigue is not a sign of weakness or failure. It is simply your mind saying, keep going, and your body saying, I cannot do it anymore. But because you have built your identity on high energy, reliability, on being the one who always delivers and never quits, you keep on going until one day you cannot. If you have felt the energy drain, the positive mindset wavering, the shortage of happy moments and excitement, it does not mean you are failing. It might simply mean you are burnt out or very close to it. Learn to recognize the warning signs and then do something about it. High performers are vulnerable not because they lack resilience, but because they refuse to acknowledge limits. Real strength is not the ability to endure endlessly. It is the wisdom to know that when endurance becomes self-destructive, there is courage in saying, I need a break. We think of energy as something we spend, but in truth, it is something we manage. Physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual energy are interdependent systems. When one depletes, the other strains to compensate until the whole structure collapses. I recently read this great line in an article on burnout written by Antonio Iozzo of Alpha. Burnout is imbalance disguised as effort. You might be physically strong but emotionally drained, or mentally sharp but spiritually flat. The fire still burns, but it is burning the wrong fuel. The greatest leaders are not those with endless energy. They are those who understand their energy equation, how to manage it and how to fix it when things go wrong. But I believe burnout or intentional fatigue is not caused by the idea or philosophy of intentionality. I believe the problem might be the expectation of perfection. You see, our willpower, that mental muscle required for intentionality, is a finite resource. If we demand 100% intentionality in 100% of our life, we create potential intentional fatigue. We are setting ourselves up for an inevitable emotional crash, or what I call the discipline paradox. The harder you try to control everything, the faster you lose control over the few things that matter most. So how do you keep the intentionality levels high and prevent intentional fatigue? How do you stay disciplined without slipping up? I believe I've figured out the solution, and I've recently started trying it out in my own life, and it seems to be working. The key is simpler than you might think. It's about intentional focus, not universal control. So here's my list of 5 solutions, 5 ways to overcome intentional fatigue and create a more intentional life in a more sustainable, more easy attainable way. Solution number 1, stop chasing perfection. It does not work. And remember, I'm a perfectionist, so try and imagine how hard it is for me to finally admit this. Trying to be perfect in your life, in everything you do, is debilitating. Everything can never be a priority, because if everything is a priority, nothing is. Instead, I recommend identifying and then prioritizing a few things. Let's call them your life non-negotiables. Things that you will always be intentional with, even when the world is chaotic. Good examples are a positive mindset and disciplined financial management. Next, identify a few more aspects of your life that you want to be more intentional with. And let's call this your secondary intentional list. On this list, allow yourself to be a little less than perfect, to slip up on every now and then, where you show yourself some intentional grace. This could, for example, be exercise, a healthy diet, and getting enough sleep. Finally, you will need a longer list of things you want to be more intentional with, like reading or learning a skill or language. But you work on these only when circumstances allow, when you have the time. You intentionally allow yourself to ignore them when life gets challenging. This is not slacking. It is intentional prioritizing. Solution number 2, practice self-compassion. Give yourself more credit for how hard you are trying. You are allowed to be a work in progress. Be very, very careful of being too hard on yourself. Be even more careful who you measure yourself against. It is easy to get demotivated when someone else looks more successful or more intentional or more disciplined in their life. Remember, you don't know everything about that person you are comparing yourself to. You do not know what they are struggling with, what sacrifices they have had to make, or what aspects of their life they are not intentional with. Unless you are very close to someone, people often only let you see what they want you to see. Their highlight reel, not their blooper reel. Not everyone is prepared to be as vulnerable as I am on this podcast. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It is the wisdom to treat yourself as you would treat a friend who is struggling. When you miss a gym session, instead of launching into a debilitating self-criticism, you simply say, "I missed it, but I'll get back to it tomorrow." You conserve the mental energy that criticism would have depleted. This preserved mental energy acts as a positive feedback loop, making it easier to be more disciplined the next day. Solution number 3, find the fun. Sometimes life can feel like a grind, like Sisyphus in Greek mythology, who has to roll a huge boulder up a hill for eternity, never reaching the top. If you find yourself trying incredibly hard every day, really putting in the time and effort, and you still feel like you are failing, maybe you need something to bring some balance back in your life. The whole process of chasing success, being ambitious, focusing on your goals and achieving your long-term dreams can be exceptionally tiring, and keeping motivation levels high is extraordinarily difficult. If you do not break it up with interim rewards, you risk burnout and losing the plot completely. You risk intentional fatigue. And here it is important to realize interim rewards has to be something that has the ability to re-energize you. It does not have to be something massive or very expensive, but it will help a lot if it's something fun, something you genuinely enjoy, that has the ability to get you to really relax. We need to remind ourselves that the process of continuous improvement and increased intentionality is not just tough, it can also be very boring. Most of the habits that are good for us, most of the behaviors that we need to do more of in our life are actually quite boring, and boring can never be fun. So find the fun, bring some more intentional fun into your life to enable you to handle the boring parts better. Maybe, just maybe, it makes achieving your goals, changing your habits, and being more intentional not just more fun, but a little bit easier as well. Solution number 4, seek a witness to your life. I cannot stress the benefit of this solution enough. Find an accountability partner. Yes, I've spoken about accountability partners before in IWPK a number of times. But I've again personally experienced the profound role people play in our lives in keeping us accountable, keeping us disciplined and intentional. For the last 2 weeks, my wife has been overseas for work. I've been alone at home, and because of this, I was reminded of a movie quote from a great movie I saw more than 20 years ago. Shall We Dance, starring Richard Gere and Jennifer Lopez. In the movie, there's a scene where one character asks another character why people get married. The answer? We need a witness to our lives. Having someone supporting you, keeping you accountable, like a spouse or partner that is a witness to your life, can often literally be the difference between success and failure, between a more intentional life and intentional fatigue. In the last week, I found myself more than a few times contemplating a little less discipline than I would normally show when my wife was there. Skipping an exercise, eating something unhealthy, watching TV instead of reading. An accountability partner is nothing more than a witness to our lives, a seriously undervalued and underappreciated element to a more disciplined, more intentional life. Solution number 5, shifting the metric from quantity to quality in your life. This is something I've been very guilty of on my own intentional journey, especially over the last few years. In our constant chase of success, wealth, and happiness, it's easy to be convinced that the more you put in, the more you will get out. But this equation often prioritizes quantity over quality. The danger is that a focus on quantity can work for a while, but the success, wealth, and happiness you get might be empty, might not be enough if the focus never shifts. Especially as success compounds, as you achieve your goals and then your goals start to change. Now, if at this point in your life you are not able to shift your focus from quantity to quality, staying intentional becomes increasingly difficult. Finding the energy and motivation to stay disciplined becomes increasingly challenging. And that is why instead of moving the goalposts, rather find a way to shift from quantity to quality. Let me try and illustrate this point with the practical example of money and retirement. Let's pretend you have a specific money goal or level of wealth you have set yourself to be able to retire financially independent. An amount that would ensure a comfortable retirement doing what brings you joy. Now, if you're fortunate enough to hit that number, maybe even 5 years earlier than planned, it is important to be very careful of saying, what if I continue working and increase that number by another 20%. I'm not advocating for early retirement. I understand the dangers of retiring and doing nothing. All I'm saying is be careful of reaching a point in your life where enough is never enough, and you are never able to properly shift the focus from quantity, more money, more hours, more success, to quality, more time with family, more creative pursuits, more life-enriching travel. Being more intentional can also be about having the wisdom to define your finish line. That's it for this episode, and all that is left to do is my tip of the week. It is a book again, one that I'm currently reading. It is the third book from the author of the book, The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel. The book is called The Art of Spending Money. Now, yes, it is a weird title. Is there really an art to spending money? Do you not simply just spend it? What I like about this book is how it ties into everything I've done in the past on IWPK around money. The art of spending money is simply another way to think about being more intentional with your money. In this sense, it's a great book with some incredibly valuable advice on using money wisely. Highly recommend it. But here's why this book recommendation for me is also relevant to the topic of today's podcast. Yes, of course, there's an art to spending money, but I believe the more important art to master is the art of spending your time. I would argue this is a more difficult skill to master because time is a more valuable, finite commodity than money. As I've mentioned in my intro, an interesting topic for another episode that I will explore in the future. And when I do it, I will be certain to build it around a reference to the 2011 movie In Time. Not a great movie, but a fascinating premise about a future world in which money does not exist anymore. And the only commodity in life is time, literally tracked on a clock on your arm. Think about it. If time meant everything and could be used to trade for anything, would you continue to use your time the way you currently do? Or will you change the things and people you spend your time on? Interesting thought exercise. Thank you for joining me for another episode of IWPK. Thank you for allowing me to explore this interesting flaw in living a more intentional life with you. I truly hope this exploration helps you find the right levels of intentionality for your life. I hope my 5 solutions have given you some practical help in becoming more intentional without risking intentional fatigue. It has certainly helped me and put me on the correct course to continue a life of intentionality and this podcast. Remember to schedule at least a little bit of intentional fun in your life, instead of just leaving it as an afterthought or just letting it happen. It might just be exactly what you need to bring the creativity, energy, passion, and enthusiasm back into your life to help you move to the next level of intentionality in your work and personal life. Have an amazing, intentional week. You've been listening to Intentionality, where we grow together. Please like, subscribe, and leave us a rating. And if this helped you today, share it with someone else on the same journey. Until next time, keep showing up with intention.